I have been studying and trying to understand the Bhagavad-gita for quite some time, and I found that nothing helps understanding and appreciating and even relishing it better than discussing it with people who are also on the same journey. And I had been doing a podcast on various topics called the Monks Podcast, where we invite different devotees and have discussions on various topics. But I felt that we should go take one topic and go deeper into it. And the Bhagavad Gita was a natural choice. And the Bhagavad Gita can be approached in different ways. So here we are going to focus on life lessons. So there are 18 chapters, and this is going to be an 18 sessions season, 2 every week. And in each session, we'll be taking one theme from one chapter, and we'll be having some broad discussion on that. So look forward to all of you joining and participating, and thank you for coming. So Radha, you want to give your background?
Sure. Yeah, I have much less experience than both of these learned Prabhus, but I've been studying Bhakti for about 7 years, maybe, and Yoga Sutras before that for maybe 5 years. But I worked as an engineer, a nuclear engineer for the Navy, actually. And then I got into project management. And then I got really into Bhakti and decided to make that more my full-time gig. So I left the other things and am so much happier now and more fulfilled. And when Vedasar asked and called and asked me to be a part of this podcast, I felt very underqualified, but accepted it as my service. And if there's anything that I can offer to be of help to you all, or share my experiences or journey, or just aid in this, then I'm very happy to do that. So that's my synopsis, and thank you both and all of you for tolerating me.
Thank you so much.
Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, we have Kamala and Anandini. They're all the way in Belgium. So let's welcome to the A Seeker's Quest podcast. Thank you for joining us, Anandini and Kamala. And then we have Owen all the way. Are you still in New York, Owen?
I'm in Seattle right now.
Seattle. I had the great honor of staying in the same room with Owen for the retreat in Gitanagari, the BMS retreat, the Body, Mind, and Spirit retreat. Incredible personality. And then we have, how do I pronounce DJANA? Again, please help me out.
Well, it's Naja.
Naja.
Yes.
And you're located in Netherlands or Belgium?
Yes, that's right. The Netherlands.
Netherlands. Naja from Netherlands. Thank you for joining us on the
Thank you.
podcast. And then we have Esther, beautiful soul. She's leading a nice community in Eindhoven, Netherlands as well. So thank you for joining us again. Then we have Sandra from Loganville, Georgia, I think.
Decula, Georgia, Prabhu.
Decula, Georgia. So moved from Loganville to Decula, Georgia, which is almost in the sticks. And so happy for you to join us. And Keshavi also leads a beautiful community in Connecticut. And very, very powerful personality doing incredible stuff out there. Oh, I forgot to say, Anandini and Kamala both are community leaders and community builders in Belgium. And then we have Nadia. She is, you're still in Belgium, right, Nadia?
Yes. I'm in Belgium.
I had the great honor of meeting her at the beautiful retreat. And then we have Brenda Bright in Atlanta, Georgia.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I see her often, and it's very beautiful to see her. And then we have Claire. She's all the way in Miami. And
Namaste. Thank you for having me.
another beautiful soul all the way from Miami. And the others that I know are Vina. And Vina, I think you're all the way in Brazil. And she's another very beautiful soul.
I think, is that Vina? That might be Vina from Pittsburgh.
Ooh,
Vina, are you from Pittsburgh or Brazil?
we don't want to get that
I'm
wrong.
from Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Oh,
We got a
okay.
Pittsburgh
Looks like the same Vina. And Radha Priti, would you like to introduce the other ones? I may not know them.
Sure. Yeah, we have Lev here. Lev is the go-to guy at Super Soul Farm in upstate New York. He
Yes, I
helps out
remember meeting Lev.
a lot over there. Yeah. And we have Michael. Michael, you're from Pittsburgh as well, right?
Hare Krishna, yes, from Pittsburgh.
Hare Krishna. Yes. And I think that's
Mahesh. Mahesh, are you in Atlanta or are you?
Hello, Krishna Prabhu. This is Mahesh. I'm based out of Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas. Welcome to this
Thank you.
beautiful podcast. And then we have Claudia or Chintamani. She's also in Connecticut. So thank you for joining us. Okay. I think we welcomed everybody to the podcast. This is our first one. Is there anyone we're missing? Okay, perfect. Of course, everybody knows Radha Priti. She's based in Pittsburgh, doing some really cool stuff. So, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, I think we're ready.
Yeah, thank you. So the way I thought we could take it is that we can start with a theme from the first chapter. So I'll speak some things and feel free to chip in, to challenge, to contradict, to compliment. So, and we'll have time for discussions also. So we'd prefer that if any of you have any questions, the thought was that if you can type the questions, then rather we can she can ask on your behalf that way. So I'll also use a whiteboard to write certain things. So I'll first give a quick introduction to the Bhagavad-gita.
Yeah, and if you just want to message me privately the question so it doesn't distract everybody on the podcast, that would be great. But feel free to send them. That will be fun.
So I'll be using this as a blackboard, whiteboard to write some things and draw some things. And let me start first with the theme which we're going to discuss. This is when life becomes a battle. We can meet people from many different backgrounds, different social, political, cultural, even religious situations. But there is one thing which we probably can all agree about, and that is that life is tough. That no matter how wealthy, how good looking, no matter how well connected, how charismatic, how talented any person might be, life is not a cakewalk for anyone. We all face difficulties. And now difficulties may come at many different times, but there are battles which we face in life, which are bad enough. But there are battles we don't want to fight. There are sometimes we look forward to certain problems, to certain challenges, because we feel that those will help us grow, and those are going to lead us to some better place. But the toughest situations are life battles that we don't want to fight. And the Bhagavad-gita begins with such a situation. So the Bhagavad-gita is a part of an ancient Hindu epic. Now, it's called a Hindu epic, but it's essentially about characters whose life stories convey universal values and lessons. So this epic is called the Mahabharata. Bharat refers to India, and Mahabharata is considered to be the world's longest poem. It has 110,000 verses within it. And within that, somewhere in the middle, in the sixth book, there is a section which is the book itself, the Mahabharata itself has 18 books within it. And just before a climactic war, there is a section which is called the Bhagavad-gita, which also incidentally has 18 chapters. And it is this book's 18 chapters. So we are in one sense expanding this now. So these 18 chapters are what we will be focusing on during our discussion. And in this chapter, I'll discuss about what the battle over there was briefly. But before we go into that, the point that makes the Bhagavad-gita, one of the points that makes it such a relevant book is that if you consider there's two parties, there is what you can call as the good guys, the Pandavas, and there are the bad guys called the Kauravas. But the problem is, among the bad guys also, there are some good guys. And here their leader is Arjuna. He is not officially their commander, but he's by far their strongest leader, is the foremost archer. And at the start of the Bhagavad Gita, both of these armies are facing each other. But then Arjuna suddenly has a moment of reflection. And he, with his chariot, comes in between the two armies. And from there he beholds. And when he's beholding this, he's not just seeing the two armies. This is not a reconnaissance visit to the middle of the battlefield. It says he actually wants to look at who's out there, who's fighting. When he assesses the costs, he starts feeling this fight is too much. And that's when he decides that I can't fight. Now, while this is historical, many historians have found lots of evidences for the Mahabharata war and many of the incidents in the Mahabharata. But it is not just historical. It is also representational. Arjuna represents the fighting spirit within all of us. Like I said, life is tough, and we all need that fighting spirit to face life's adversities and adversaries. So when we are facing adversities are more of events, adversaries are people sometimes who fight against them. And when they're fighting against them, it just becomes unbearable. Sometimes we just not feel like fighting. So this is the point where the Gita begins. And if we go back, so I'll just make one more point and then Veda and Radha can comment. So by the end of the first chapter, Arjuna is disheartened. He's so disheartened that he puts aside his bow, unwilling to fight. He says, I just can't. I can't. But by the end of the Gita, Arjuna is enlivened. Arjuna is ready to do the needful, even if it means fighting. And similarly, life's adversities and adversaries can sometimes down our spirit. They can discourage us so much that we feel it's just too much. I quit. Now we can quit from a job, we can quit from a relationship, but this is existential. This is like quitting from life itself. And that can be extremely dangerous. But the Gita helps Arjuna find a meaningful purpose, even amid this battle. And finding that meaningful purpose is what enlivens us. So the journey of the Gita is the journey toward a meaningful purpose. We find meaning in life, and then within that, we find our purpose. So that is the journey we will be going on during this series of discussions of how Arjuna found a meaningful purpose that enliven him, and how we can similarly within the Gita find resources to gain a meaningful purpose. Yes, so over to you, Veda and Radha.
I find the Bhagavad-gita to be a very interesting script from the yoga text, where it not only is something that is practical on day-to-day functional level, but it also addresses the emotional journey of an individual, and how the physical and emotional journey, when it's intertwined, and how that can actually, when you extract the essence of this too, we're able to find the spiritual component to all of this. So for me, it has been one of the powerful texts in the yoga texts, where it provides very tangible solutions to dealing with this three-dimensional life existence. So this is why I feel very enlivened to get into this topic with all of you, and having Chaitanya Charan and Radha Priti. Hopefully we'll dive even deeper into this.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, this is the whole thing about the Gita, that we'll talk in the second session about how the Gita works. It addresses various levels of the self. Just one quick point about this practical. In life, there are always going to be ups and downs, like a sine wave. So this is the outer world. This is what often we call as the physical world. Now, when this happens, there could be two possible responses in our inner world. One response is that these outer outer binaries, they cause even bigger dualities in our inner world. And then we become more and more overwhelmed. So there are some people who tend to say hyperventilate over everything that goes wrong. It's like the end of the world for them. Or the other way is, this is what the Gita helps us to do. There'll be outer dualities, but internally we tend to become steadier. So it is this steadiness, that it's not that we don't have emotions, but we are not tossed around by our emotions. That inner steadiness is what will enable us to face the outer situations. It's not that the conversation of the Gita magically removes the challenge of the battle, but it helps Arjuna in that steadiness. And that's one way it addresses the physical and the emotional intertwined. The physical can toss us up and down, or the physical can be a stimulus for us to find something deeper that steadies us.
I find another interesting thing on this, a side note, is that this physical and emotional, we all have practical, functional components to our lives, which is very much affected by our physical and emotional aspects. All diseases in this world are emotional, primarily emotional, than physical. So psychosomatic and psychogenic disorders in this world, which is the two main causes of sickness, it's coming from the fact that this adversaries and adversities in life, when we are able to understand and compartmentalize and see the spiritual element to be extracted from these two situations that you presented from the Bhagavad-gita, it is truly a path to not just physical health and mental health and spiritual health, but it's a holistic approach to understanding the healthy life that we can all live and optimize our experience in this world.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. it's interesting if you consider what you exactly said about Arjuna. As far as body was considered, is perfectly fine. He was a trained warrior. He was fit. He was ready to fight. But it was his mind that collapsed. And when the mind collapsed, what happened was his body also became dysfunctional. So it is not exactly a disease that Arjuna suffered, but it was definitely a psychogenetic dysfunctioning that happened. So from the mind, things came down to the body. And these are often the most difficult to deal with for us. Because if there are physical problems, we can find some solutions to them. But when our mind breaks down, our spirit just goes off and then we can't function. Yeah. Thank you.
Radha, Priti, would you like to add something to this?
Yeah, I guess it's my experience with the Gita. What really attracted me to these teachings at first was just when I started to apply them in my own life, seeing the change that they made. In my workplace was huge. When I started just applying some of these practices internally to myself in the way that I dealt with people and I handled relationships, my career just kind of like took off. And then what ended up happening a couple years after that was I realized that my heart wasn't really in it so much, and I didn't care if I stayed or left. But regardless of what your end goal is, these practices can help you in every facet of our material lives drastically. So that was something that that really inspired me of these teachings, really helped me to buy in.
That's fascinating. So how do you feel that your career took off? Was it that you were more focused or more composed, or what exactly? How did it help you to deal better with people?
Yeah, so I was a project manager, so I was dealing with a lot of people all the time. And when you're a project manager, you pretty much have no authority but all responsibilities. So the way that you get people to work is by personal. What? I'm sorry.
No, it's a very, very poignant way of putting it, that no authority, full responsibility. That's a tough situation.
Yeah, it's kind of a brutal position because you don't really have any real oomph or power to get anyone to do anything, but everybody looks to you like if it's not done, it's your problem. So it's the way that you have to get work done the way that I found to get work done is through personal relationships. And in addition to, I was working for the Navy, so people, the other thing is mission based. Like people, if they really believe in the mission, are more likely to work hard and be productive. But as a leader in that position, when I first started to implement some of these practices, like mind control, like not responding, not reacting, and responding more to a relationship, taking that time between stimulus and response to figure out the best course forward that aligns with your end goal. Just things like that, and working with the mind, I saw that I was that much more effective in managing people and inspiring people as well. So that was just one example. I remember one time I got this email from somebody. I don't even remember what the email was in regards to, but usually I would just respond back and show him how much smarter I was than him, how he didn't know what he was talking about. And this is like someone who's super difficult, everybody struggled with. And I would usually just take the opportunity to slam him in front of everyone. And I stopped and was like, okay, what is going to be the result of this? I played this through a little bit in my mind. And then, that's exactly what happened there. And I looked at the end game. The end game of what would this look? Would he end up doing what I wanted him to do? And then how would I look to everybody else if I'm doing this? And ultimately, I wanted to look dharmically. I wanted people to look at me like I was a leader. I was calm. I was collected, and I was not reactive. And then ultimately, I wanted him to be a team player. So I didn't want to just completely ostracize him and ultimately that was the goal. The goal was not me exerting my ego over him, which is what we do in the material world, right?
Mm.
And so I just took some steps back, redefined what my actual goal was, and then it became clear of the best way to get there. And that was by responding to him in a way that reflected those characteristics, my patience, my tolerance, my understanding, and my cool, collected seat. And in doing that, when people see you like that as a leader, that's where really you get the real power in leadership. And that was what I found out.
So you felt you got the insights or the self-mastery, self-discipline to do that by studying the Gita?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. It was revolutionary.
An interesting point that I take from what you just shared is that reaction, based on the story you just went, your reaction actually comes from the mind, because the mind's tendency is to be quite instantaneous, and then you responded. Controlled mind means when the mind is operating under the influence of the intelligence, then it has the ability to process and rationalize, and thereby you're able to respond. And that is something very clearly taught in the Bhagavad-gita. And it's something that I have also learned, and it's been very useful in my day-to-day lives to be able to respond, because this is the very reason actually we are studying the Bhagavad-gita, to try and find these beautiful nuggets, how it's practical and tangible and applicable in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, and the Gita, it's also nice because
Just 1 minute.
I'm sorry?
Just 1 minute. What Veda was saying, just quickly depicting this. So basically, we will be talking more about this, but you mentioned the terms mind and intelligence, and I would just like to clarify them. That what the Gita says is, inside us there are these two parts. The mind is a little bit more of the impulsive side within us. It just goes by emotions. And the intelligence is the more of a rational side. So whenever any stimulus comes in from outside, it can either trigger our mind, and if it triggers our mind, then what comes out is a reaction. Just, you did this to me, so I'll do this to you. You yell at me, I'll yell louder at you. But if that stimulus, if that stimulus triggers our intelligence, then from that what comes out is a response. Okay, you did this to me, but what exactly do I want to achieve over here? What is the purpose of this interaction? What is the purpose of what we are doing? And based on that, we can choose wisely. So the key is, now at the start of the Gita, Arjuna was over here. Arjuna was reacting. He says, no, I can't fight. This is too much. So this is where Arjuna was at the start of the Gita. But this is chapter 1. But by the end of the Gita, Arjuna had come here. And that is where we would like to go. It come to the level of responding. Yeah, please go ahead. So the self essentially has to choose, will I identify with the mind or will I identify with the intelligence? And we'll discuss more about this model, but this is what goes in the inner world. So when we identify with the mind, I earlier mentioned this point about the outer situation leading to hyperventilation, a far greater reaction. So this happens when the mind is active. When we just react based on our emotions alone. But this steadiness comes when our intelligence becomes active. So that's what the Gita will help us to do, to help us activate our intelligence in a more dynamic and swift way. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and even bigger than this, what this did for me, which was huge. I mean, after this, like I said, I got promoted, and I felt like this was like the key to my career. That being said, the Bhagavad-gita gave me a reason to want to do this, because in the material world, it's like, why do I care? If the goal in the material world is to climb the corporate ladder, to succeed, then what I'm going to do is show how great I am to everybody else. Like, that's my goal. I'm leading with my ego. But in spiritual life, it's different. That's not the goal. And when first experiencing a relationship with God and feeling how sweet that is, and then learning more about this true spiritual path through the Bhagavad-gita, it was like, okay, if I really want to pursue this relationship further, I have to kind of change some things within myself. So that was my real motivation even for doing it. But then when I did that, I saw how much closer that brings me to God, or how that affects my material life in such a positive way. But ultimately how that brings me closer to God, which was really why I did it in the first place, because otherwise, who cares? What's the point? It's material life. I'll succeed.
Yeah. Thank you. So I try to articulate this. If I'm right, let me know that. If first it changed how I function, so we are more calmer, we react, we don't react, we respond. But then eventually, why we are functioning? Okay, I can be calm, but I can calmly just try to boost my ego, and calmly try to go for fame and glory and proclaim my superiority over others. But we can function for a higher purpose, to grow spiritually, to go closer to the divine. Is that what you're saying overall?
Yeah. And that motivation is like the North Star of all of life, I found, because I've found how connected and peaceful, and it just works. It's a self-fulfilled life.
So would you say how I function as the position as an observer?
Yes, you could say that. Now, here, basically, you talked about react, no. Respond, yes. So one of the keys to responding is that we learn to observe ourselves. We don't just act, but we observe ourselves. And yeah.
There's a very popular book in the world. I think it's called The Untethered Soul.
Yes, I've read that book, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very popular book, and they really, really emphasize on this point of being the witness, to have the witness consciousness, and that's when you're able to respond. So very
Yes,
nice.
one of the keys, the Gita talks about various yogas. And one of the yogas within the broad Gita's ambit is Jnana Yoga. And Jnana Yoga focuses primarily or almost exclusively on being the observer. Observe yourself. And the more we observe ourselves, the more we can evaluate what we are doing. We can regulate what we are doing. That's definitely one of the key parts of the Bhagavad Gita. And we'll discuss that in due course.
Yeah, in my experience, you try this on in your normal life, in your relationships, in your workplace, with your kids, and what you find is how effective, how revolutionary it is to everything in your life. But then after I did that and found that, I found that those things that I was trying to accomplish through those relationships, through those workplaces, through those, was not ultimately what I needed to make my heart happy. And so it's like, then the Bhagavad Gita also provides the next step.
Yeah, I put it this way. Gita purpose is, what does the Gita help us to do? At one level, it acts as like a shock absorber. Life will give us many shocks, and it helps us to absorb the shocks. Yes, don't get affected. This person spoke like this to me, this person did like that, all this happened. And that is, at itself, is very valuable. But eventually what it does, it acts like a goal transformer. It gives us a higher purpose for living. And what we seek in life, that itself changes by the study of the Gita. And I think that's what, to some extent, what you're trying to say.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is what happened to me also, if I can share. I grew up in India. I was in a pious family. I knew about the Gita. I think I heard about the Gita when I was 2 or maybe 3 or 4. In India, it's a tradition to get small children to memorize the verses of the Gita, and then they will be Bhagavad-gita recitation competitions. So I recited verses and I won some prizes. I thought, hey, this is nice. It is nothing. I didn't see it as a guidebook. Just nice sounding verses which I memorized, and hey, people praise me for it. So that was all. When I was in my college at that time, in India, it's a very educationally competitive society. So by the time I was studying in university, I had one purpose in my life. At least at that time, that was I wanted to be a brilliant academic success. So I wanted to be the first in my class, the first in my college. And I was generally good, but I was second, third. I was never the first. Sometimes I was just joined first. So at that time, when I gave GRE, is the exam which non-Americans give to come to America for their graduation studies. So when I gave that exam, my English was reasonably good, much better much better than most Indians, most of the people who I was competing with, because I liked English. One of my hobbies in childhood was just pick up a book and pick up dictionary and memorize words. So I did very well, and I was first, not just first in my class or my college. I was first in the entire state of Maharashtra, just several million people. And I was first in the history of my college. So you could say that almost I felt that I had become a giant, and everyone was down here. Not in the sense of I had a big ego, probably I had, but it just said I had achieved something stupendous. And everybody congratulated me. But at that time, it happened that one after another, when I was three of my friends, they just forgot to congratulate me. So when I was meeting, when the first friend, many people congratulated, but he forgot. I just felt a little annoyed. Why is he not congratulated? But when the second person didn't congratulate me, I became irritated. What's going on? And the third person didn't congratulate me. I was enraged. But then I felt I didn't want to be looked pathetic by asking, why are you not congratulating me? And that was the time what Veda said. I had almost like an experience of self-observation. So I was here and I was feeling dissatisfied, much more than dissatisfied. And I felt as if I was somewhere here looking down at myself. I suddenly felt as if, hey, this is what you wanted to achieve throughout your life. And you dreamt that achieving this would make you happy. But rather than making you happy, it has only made you more dependent for your happiness on others. If they don't congratulate, not only are you not happy, you are actually miserable. So I almost felt like I was looking at my life ahead. Thought, what will I achieve? Maybe I'll come to America for higher studies. I would get into Ivy League university. I might win some awards. I might write some books. But for all those things, I thought that I will always need those things in themselves. Would they make me happy? I would need someone to congratulate me, someone to appreciate me. So I thought that, is there some happiness which is not dependent on externals? And that's when I started exploring. One of my friends somehow at that time gave me a Bhagavad-gita. And whereas for me it was just a cultural monument in the past, now it became more like a personal guidebook. And in the Gita, in 6.22, this is one of my favorite verses. Krishna says that there is a state of inner absorption. Technically, it is called as samadhi. Yam labdhva chaparam labham manyate nadhikam tataha. When this inner absorption is there, he says there are two characteristics of this inner absorption. The first is that there is no more craving. If we are internally absorbed in the divine, in the ultimate reality, then when that samadhi, that state of samadhi comes in, then we feel this is the best thing in life. That there are other things I can pursue, but there is no more intolerable craving. And even when difficulties come, the Gita is not utopian in saying that there won't be any difficulties, but there will be no more lamenting. There will be disturbances, but the disturbances won't disturb us. So I felt this is this is what real accomplishment looks like. This is what, if this is for real, and if I can achieve this, then that is what will actually bring satisfaction. So that's the journey I'm still on. I can't say I'm there. I'm still a long way away, but I have experienced over the years that the same things which would agitate me hugely, maybe 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, before I started embarking on the spiritual journey, they don't agitate me that much now. So that inner steadiness, to some extent, I've experienced it. And I feel that steadiness has come from that higher spiritual connection. So this is about a goal transforming. The shock absorption, goal transformation. So this is what the Bhagavad-gita has meant for me. And we will discuss what this inner absorption is and how that comes about later in one of our future sessions.
It's nice as you were talking about this inner absorption in my mind, I was immediately thinking of the ocean, how there's so many waves in the ocean, and it's a very continuous flow and it never stops. And if we get stuck in the waves on top of the ocean, the likelihood of us getting smashed to the ground and beaten down every time we try to rise up, it'll be a very, very upheaval task. And I remember years ago when I was in the monastery, we went on a trip to a place called Puri, Jagannath Puri, and I got to see the ocean, first time in my life. And I got to see the waves and the beautiful sound of the ocean. And people were very easily overjoyed in being in that environment. And I wanted to also go and try and see how I can extract some joy. So I jumped into the ocean and I was trying to deal with the waves. And I had a friend of mine from California. He was teaching me how to body surf. So when I went and jumped on the waves, little did I know, this waves are so powerful. The wave came and just smashed me. I was almost paralyzed on the bank of the ocean. So this, sometimes I think of how life is when we don't go in this inner absorption, then it's very easy to get smashed by all these waves that come our way in our lives. And it's continuous. It is not something that just stops. It's a continuous thing. And then I remember reading somewhere in the Gita, in the purport, I think Prabhupada explains about these little fishes. They go very deep underneath the ocean and it's calm and peaceful. There's no waves down there. So when you talk about inner absorption, I always take it how Bhagavad-gita focuses on trying to be centered in the heart and be the eye of the storm, as they say it in English, instead of being in the storm. And how beautiful it is, even though there's so much going on outside, when we are centered in the heart, then all challenges of life are very easy to deal with. And I also feel that Arjuna's conclusion is when he takes shelter of his heart and takes shelter of the divine Krishna within his heart, and he takes shelter of that, then all his problems seem to be very trivial and very small.
Yeah, beautifully put. It's, in one sense, that's what Krishna helps Arjuna to go deep within himself. And sometimes our identity, this is the main theme we'll be discussing in our next session, that our identity is almost like an onion. Keep peeling layers. And as we keep peeling layers, we go deeper and deeper into ourselves. So, in one sense, the question for Arjuna is, what should I do? Specifically, fight or not fight? And we don't have to fight a physical war, but we also face difficult situations. And then that leads to a deeper question. If we go deeper, is what is worth doing? Especially when something is difficult, we naturally do a cost benefit analysis. What is really worth doing? And then to answer that question, we need to go deeper. Who am I really? What really matters to me is determined by who I really am. So in one sense, this is the journey that the Gita goes on. Activity that is determined by priority. What is normally we go through life, but suddenly if something demands far more than what you would normally want to invest. So is this really important for me? So we have a job, it requires 8 hours of work. That's what we thought. Maybe 6 hours, 8 hours. And suddenly we find the job is going to require 10, 12 hours of work every day. Is this really worth it? Do I really want to do this? And then when we go to the priority, really go deeper. It's like another layer of the onion being peeled. Okay, who am I really? What is my defining identity? It is that which helps us understand what we should be doing. So that is the journey the Gita will take us on. And you have to join on that as we move forwards. So at the end of the first chapter of the Gita, Arjuna is overwhelmed now. I can't do this. I can't fight. He can't fight. He said, because there are good guys on the other side, and many of them happen to be his relatives. He says, no. Is it really worth it? Is it worth fighting against them? So sometimes, whenever we are making a decision, we can look off at one thing. We can look at the consequences. If I do this, that's what will happen. But there is also the concerns. Now, I'm differentiating concerns and consequences here in the sense that this is what is the issue. And this is what is going to result. So if I do this, these concerns will be addressed. So action will lead to the addressing of the consequences. Addressing of the concerns. But that same action which I take, it also has consequences. And we can say no action, those consequences will be avoided. So where do we focus on? The underlying concerns that need to be addressed, or the consequences that we want to avoid? So sometimes this is not the best metaphor or the best term, but sometimes the word is, in military, the word uses collateral damage. So for Arjuna, he starts looking at the collateral damage and he feels it's too much. I just can't do this. But Krishna shifts his vision from, okay, that there's going to be that cost. But why am I really doing this? What is the reason for fighting? And as his reasons go deeper and deeper, then he finds that the concerns that are being addressed are far more important. So we also, as we explore the Gita, we will go deeper. And what really matters for us, what really makes us tick. As we find that, then we will be able to bear whatever are the challenges, whatever are the costs we have to pay for doing something difficult. We won't have to fight against our relatives, at least not physically, hopefully, but we have to face difficulties. And when our deeper concerns are clearly understood, then we are ready to pay the price. And most of the times in life, we are unable to rise to challenges because we focus on the cost of the challenge. This is the cost. But what is the concern is going to address? So if we understand that concern, then we will be able to actually address it. We will be able to persist in that.
Can we recap the whole thing? Because I have a feeling that
Yeah,
we covered a lot of beautiful space in this, because there is
Yes,
only
sure.
5 more minutes.
Yes. Radha, you want to make any point before I recap? Okay. So,
Sorry, I was on mute, sorry. I was just thinking as you were talking that what you just described as Arjuna was similar to both of your and I's experiences, except that it all kind of happened at once for Arjuna, and that he was faced with this conflict, and what he immediately wanted to do was what he wanted to do was to address his material concerns. And the more that he engaged in this conversation with Krishna, the more that his perspective kind of opened up, and he changed he ended up changing what he wanted to do because he saw a bigger, his North Star kind of changed, his perspective widened, kind of like what happened to us in a sense, where we think what we're doing is to obtain some material objective. And as we're doing that, we learn that that's not actually our biggest priority. And then we end up changing much more about our life than just how we act in that little situation. Did that make sense?
yes, true. So the North Star is generally considered unchangeable, but the North Star itself can change. What really matters in my life, that's when I talked earlier about the goal transformation, and that itself changes through the Gita. We find a more meaningful way to live. Yeah, thank you. So let's quickly recap. So the first point we discussed was the Gita's context, that the context is it was spoken on a battlefield, it's a part of the Mahabharata, and also discussed of the effect. So where it happened and what it did, that is what intrigues us about the Gita. Effect was that Arjuna, he was disheartened, and from there he became enlivened. And we all would like this to happen to us. How does that happen? That's what will be our journey in this. So then the second point we discussed was is how does the Gita affect us? So how we function, the one effect of the Gita is that it helps us to change how we function. So instead of reacting, we start responding. We start observing ourselves, and we start understanding what is the best way to act. And then this is more like it helps us to absorb shocks, the shock absorber, and then it's also a goal transformer. It gives us a higher meaning in life, a higher vision for looking at life. What is it that I want to achieve? What is it I want to move forward towards? So then the discussion was about how within us there is the mind and the intelligence. An external stimuli triggers the mind, then we react. It's short-sighted. When we respond with the intelligence, when the intelligence is triggered, that's when we respond, and that's healthy. So the Gita, one of its key themes is that we become an inner observer, and it trains us in learning to observe ourselves. So that what also happened to Arjuna. I talked my incident about how I had this experience of observing myself, and then we discussed towards the end about how when this happens, the example the ocean came up, how deep down the ocean is calm, and although on the top there might be the turbulence, but the deeper we go, so it's like a peeling layers of identity, like an onion. That example. So we go from activity to priority to ultimately identity. Who am I really? And that determines what matters to me, and that determines what I should be doing. So that question of identity, who we are really, that's what we'll discuss in next session. Did I miss anything major out? Veda?
No, I think this is really well done, and I think we are on time. So we wanted to see if there's any one question because we have 1 minute.
1 minute, okay.
That was good. Brenda messaged me and said that this reminds her of the slokas on chapter 4 about understanding the difference between action and inaction.
Oh, yes. inaction. Sometimes there is
Can we go
what is
back
that?
to the
Crimes of omission. Now, you don't do something, and that means you've done something wrong. So sometimes inaction can also be culpable. Yeah. Thank you.